very much, Mr. Shields. And if you'd all please rise and pledge allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, good evening, everybody, for coming in and joining us via streaming or if you're watching on television. If I can have the roll call, please.
Ms. Berry. Here. Mr. Duncan. Here. Mr. Kalin. Here. Mr. Pepe. Here. Mr. Snyder. Mr. Snyder's absent. Mr. Tarter. Here. Mayor Baruch.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. And we now are on to adoption of the meeting agenda. If I can have a motion to adopt the meeting agenda, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
If I can have a second. Second. Is Mr. Kalin on the second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. The meeting agenda is adopted. We also have very, very important and very auspicious, shall I say, proclamation this evening that I'm very excited to share. Is Ms. Thackeray's family here? If you please rise, and I'm going to go ahead and read this, and then we'll take a photo together. Whereas Jessie Thackeray is celebrating on the occasion of her 100th birthday, whereas Jessie Thackeray has been a member of the Falls Church community and an active volunteer since 1941. Whereas Jessie Thackeray has contributed greatly to the community through her service as a leader in the creation of the city's independent school system, as a member of the school board and PTA, and as a member of the League of Women Voters, as a Cub Scout leader, as a 4-H club leader, and by serving as a warden at the Falls Church Episcopal Church. And whereas Jessie Thackeray's efforts to create the Northern Virginia Community College and working as a member and chair of the Northern Virginia Community College Board of Education has provided advanced education opportunities to countless number of students in the Northern Virginia region. Whereas Jessie Thackeray has received numerous accolades, among them being the Mighty Gundry Award for achieving the interests of women in the city and the Friends of Education Award from George Mason High School. I, therefore, Nader Baruch, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim Friday, June 14th, 2013 as Jessie Thackeray Day in the City of Falls Church, and urge everyone to recognize Ms. Thackeray's centennial milestones, celebrate the life and accomplishments of this generous woman and longtime city resident. So if the family would come up, if there's any words you want to say. Everybody squeeze together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just for-
Thank you very much. And I believe that there are a couple events celebrating Jessie Thackeray's birthday. One is on the 14th. I'm sorry, the 16th at the Episcopal Church. At what time? Was that at noon? So 10 is the celebration with lunch around potluck at about 11:30. And then there's also a celebration, I believe that's the 23rd, that's at MEH at noon. At 3, I'm sorry, at 3. So, at 3. So, and I am planning on being there, as I'm sure some council members are going to be there as well at MEH. So, thank you, and please tell Jessie we said a early congratulations on her big milestone of her birthday. Thank you. Are there any members of the public that are here to be sworn in, boards and commission members? Kathy, are you aware of anybody? Okay. We are on to receipt of public comments and requests. I have several speaker slips. I'm going to take the items that are not on the agenda first, and I've got a couple speaker slips regarding substandard lots, which is an ordinance that we're going to be taking up later in the meeting. I'm happy to take those comments now or when we get to this item. So if you'd like to speak now rather than when we begin to discuss it, I'm happy to do that. The first speaker slip that I have is from Mr. Jerry Barrett. Mr. Barrett? And congratulations on the chairmanship. I should actually probably call you chair.
I'm sure, actually, this fits with what just happened. I'm following in the footsteps of Jesse Thackeray, although it's 19 and a half years before I'll be 100. At the last meeting of the main meeting of the Community College Board, they elected me chair, and so I did some research to see who else had that job, who was a representative of the city, because in fact we are the smallest jurisdiction. And it turns out that Jesse was chair way back, and so was Jeff Talbert, who was just before me. So it's kind of diminished honor, but I think it is recognition of the city as being somebody important. And so I just leave you with that thought. You can. I just got invited to write something about this for the news press, so you'll read more about it. But she's really a remarkable person, really, and she was there at the ground laying of the community college.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. And congratulations as well, and thank you for representing the city so ably on the board. The rest of the speaker slips that I have are on the substandard lots. I'm happy to take any of those members who wish to comment now or when we get to the item. Okay. Not seeing any. We'll certainly take those comments when we get to the item. And then we now have a couple presentations. The first one is by the robotics team demonstration, and I believe Art is going to be leading the charge.
Good evening. I'm John Ballou. I teach at George Mason High School, and this is a portion of my robotics team this year, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to present their work and have them make some comments about the nature of this project and a little bit about how they did this year, and again to reinforce the idea of what a valuable this experience this has been and how much we appreciate the support of the city and the support of the council in terms of financing something like this. What we have here is our 9th robot. We've been doing this now for 9 years. And this year we had a game where the students had to design and build this machine in 6 weeks, and it had to basically perform several particular functions. One is that it had to shoot accurately frisbees. It had to be able to maybe pick them up off the ground or be reloaded somehow. And it also had to engage with 2 towers that were part of the playing field, and it had to be able to climb up. And depending upon how high they climbed, it got varying degrees of points. These guys chose to come up with a fairly fast and agile robot that's able to be pretty accurate. It used some pretty ingenious methods for being able to find its way around the field. It had a high-intensity flashlight for aiming. It has a relatively simple motor structure, but it has a very, very complex way of being able to pick frisbees up off the ground that is an engineering marvel. Unfortunately, it was a little on the slow side for the kind of game we played this year. So, gentlemen, if you would be so kind as to come and describe your design.
We can start with just showing how we pick up frisbees. So during the course of the game, the frisbees could be fed through feeder slots on the corners of the field. But about a few seconds into the game, they were already mostly on the floor. So we decided to opt for, or to have an option to pick them up off the floor in addition to receive them from the feeder slots. from the company that makes all of our pneumatic systems. Bimba makes all of our pistons. They also make a suction device that converts positive pressure into negative pressure, which is how our suction cup works, where we pluck them up off the floor and drop them into our receiving basket.
We'll demonstrate a low-power shot.
So people over there might want to be a bit careful.
So we had 6 weeks to do this, like Mr. Blue said, and of course we started with a design process where we thought about how we wanted to tackle the problem, which problems we wanted to solve, and then we started kind of a trial and error process with various prototypes and small scales, and we eventually built what we have here today, which has been modified many times and taken apart and rebuilt. And that was all in the course of 6 weeks before we went to participate in the Richmond, Virginia regional and the DC area regionals, where we did decently well at both. We were in the finals in Richmond. We made it all the way to the semifinals, defeating the #1 seeded Alliance as we were the #8. And then also in DC, we did very well, just slightly missing making the finals. So overall, we had a very good season. We were pleased with our outcome, and I think we had a pretty good year.
Great. Can I borrow that in a few weeks for my ultimate Frisbee game?
It's actually a pretty accurate shooter. We were able to.
Much more accurate than me and probably the rest of the council members, so.
It has a nice lob. But we have about 20 members of our team. We were able to have at least 4 young women on our team this year. It was very important. We had these guys are a very young team, though I was just noticing how much older and more mature they look since the beginning of the year. But this is, we only had 1 senior this year, and they did an excellent job, passed inspection very early, and had a, I think the learning process of building one of these things is really what this is all about. The 6 weeks is a very real time frame, but the evolution of their thinking and the sophistication of what they attempted to do is it's something. It's a joy to watch, and it's something that I've always gotten a lot of satisfaction from seeing that, being able to field a working robot. These guys put in an average of around 30 hours outside of school a week during the build season, and committed to a sizable hunk of time to be able to attend the competitions. There were 65 high schools at the Virginia competition, and at the Washington, D.C. competition, there were 59 high schools. And they had a chance to see the same constraints, the same time frame, the same range of materials, and each one of them was another ingenious solution to the problem. And the climate and the learning experience of being at the competition is also something that I can't say highly enough how much we appreciate being able to do that. But anyhow, these guys had a great year, and they're very eager to compete next year.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much in your representation of the city, and we look forward to seeing the team next year. Thank you. And please send our thanks to the rest of the team members as well. All right, we are on to the next presentation, which is a presentation on the bus tour on the Civil War Day. And I believe Turner is going to be doing the presentation. Sure.
Good evening.
Welcome.
My name's Morris Terman. I currently live at Goodwin House, which is a neighbor of yours, and a lot of your graduates come down to join us down there. We have a continuing love affair with the city, however. I've been a member of the city over 60 years, at least the Falls Church address. Several zip codes changes in that time frame, including this last down to Goodwin House. But during that time, I served for more than 30 years on the Historical Commission. And last June, you were honoring me by approving a Historic Commission nomination for a life membership on the commission. So I'm a little late getting to you. I hope you noted I did mail you a demurrer because I was not available last year at this time. However, I wanted to come and personally express my great gratitude for the continuation of that effort. It really came to light again during the Civil War day when, as usual, I ran 2 tours of the city with the school bus. It's been a fascinating adventure for me to have that. We've also, upon occasion, run a group of teachers. At one time or another, I'd love to get the council to go around and visit some of the great landmarks. To try to intrigue you, I think that you have all received a series of handouts which on the first page of the historical tour outline, there are a great number of items that I think are important to our history. It ends more or less at the Civil War time, or end actually at the time that the town is developed in 1875. On the back of that is the substance of the tour that we took with those that joined the bus on Civil War Day. On the back of that sheet, there's another listing of the high spots or low spots in the City of Falls Church, running from through its town incorporation and its city incorporation. The map that you received showed only the spots that we visited in terms of the Civil War time frame. It is excellent, I think, excellent story to tell about the founding of the community, the first settlers that came here. One of your handouts was on Big Chimneys, which is the 17th century home. It has a 1699 on the chimney. I feel that that is long after the date that the young couple eloped and came up here into the woods and erected that log cabin. The first log cabin was half the size that you see. On the back of that sheet is a layout of the 3 floors that exist there, or the 2 floors that exist there. The second element of that construction was in the late 1600s, might have been early 1700s, that it actually wasn't deeded. Nobody actually claimed this land until 1673. And it was bought up by the Lynches. They ran a hostelry there, a pub, if you will. I think the owner decided that actually that license wasn't issued until the 1800s, but I think the owner decided that he would have a bigger draw on the travel up and down Leesburg Pike if he had a date of 1699. So I think that was more of an advertising gimmick, I think, anything else. The Rolling Road sheet that you got was, of course, the substance of the economy in this part of the world in the 1700s. The Tobacco Rolling Road, we would I think, like to encourage the council to consider at some stage a reconstruction of a small segment of that road. It could be on city property that you hold now that has nothing on it. You can see by the map on the back of that sheet that the rolling roads came up between Hillwood and Broad Street, below the church and below Big Chimneys. Big Chimneys was obviously right on the main traffic pattern at that time, and then curled up in front of George Mason High School. The other major pre-Civil War item that we like to take them to is the only National Historic Landmark in the city, one of the few in the country, and that is the layout of the jurisdiction boundary stone down on Van Buren Street, which is Southwest 9 by the designation. These were 5 feet in length. Excuse me, the intermediate ones were 4 feet in length, 2 feet above the ground and 2 feet buried. And the side that faced the DC area was labeled the jurisdiction of the United States. The opposite side was labeled Virginia. The ones over in Maryland, of course, have a different connotation. All of ours are dated 1791s. The one in Maryland are dated 1792. As a geoscientist, I was amazed when I discovered that they had the geomagnetic variation on these stones. I think these are probably the only historic markers in the United States that show geomagnetic variation. But I think this is a treasure that incidentally, the surveyor was Andrew Ellicott, who at that time was probably the best-known surveyor in the United States, chosen by Thomas Jefferson, who was the Secretary of State at the time. He selected a black man by the name of Benjamin Banneker, which is a name that is used fairly widely in the DC area. He did all of the celestial work. He was the one, for instance, that figured out the geomagnetic variation at this at the stones. But it is when the black community decided they really wanted to try to get bigger and better recognition for Benjamin Banneker, they drummed on the Department of Interior and ended up starting at the South Cornerstone, coming up stone by stone. As soon as they saw this one in the Benjamin Banneker Park, as it's called now, on Van Buren Street, Southwest 9, this is where they wanted to get recognized. So that is now known, the National Historic Landmark for Benjamin Banneker. The last item that I would want to stress is I'm a great fan of Thaddeus Kobieski, calling her Lowe, Thaddeus Lowe. He was the first balloonist in the U.S. That served during the Civil War. His first ascension was up about where Coons is located now. It's a rather remarkable member of our historic memories here. I think Lowe's balloon is advertised widely in many publications dealing with the Civil War.
Great. Thank you
Lastly,
so-
there are two maps here, one of 1862 showing you all the roads and forts at that time frame, and on the back of it, the still existing standing structures in Falls Church that date from that time frame. So thank you very much. I wanted to, again, express my appreciation for the honor that you bestowed on me, and I hope that we'll continue to have the tours in the future.
Thank you very much, and we hope that you carry on the tours as well. And thank you for your service to the community while you were a resident and while you're a neighbor as well. So thank you, Rick. All right, we are on to summary of written comments. Shaf, you would summarize the written comments?
Council, you have a packet of emails that have all been received today. Before you, you have 13 emails from different citizens who are in support of the proposed ordinance known as the Split Lot Ordinance. John Boddicker, Barry Bushow, Shirley Connick, Barb Cram, Jim and Julie Custer, Peggy Dolan, Kathy Kleiman, Jean and Richard Nott, Patrick and Angela Mellon, Nancy and James Morrison, Peggy Reel, Melissa Teets, and Susan Updike. You also have an email from Dave Rifkin at 126 Whittier Circle. He wants the council and the school board to get the Virginia High School League to change the classification for athletic competition for George Mason High School so that its students can play local high schools in the Northern Virginia region. And those are your written comments, council.
Thank you very much. Right, we are on to council requests. Council members, any requests for city staff? All right, we're on to the report of the city manager to council, Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor Baruch, members of council. Just 3 things to report. Recently, the city council approved a contract to conduct a long-range comprehensive plan for the city's library, for the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library. And that planning effort is underway, and I just wanted to alert the public that there are 3 sessions. 2 have already passed, or one of them is tonight. The last of the 3 is for public input into this study. To kick this study off will be on Wednesday, June 12th, from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And that is an opportunity to learn more about what the goal of this comprehensive planning effort for the city's library is, and to provide some input into that as well. And so again, the public is invited to come to the library and discuss this with our consultants and our library director on Wednesday, June 12th, from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Secondly, the council has on its schedule on June 17th an update on transportation funding matters. And I'm just noticing there's some buzzing going on. Are we under a tornado? Okay, good. Flash flood. Okay, well, we can handle that.
We'll get to that shortly, but we don't want to be in the basement. But all kidding aside, if folks who are watching this happen to be in low-lying areas or in floodplains, please make plans accordingly if you're tuning in.
Thank you. The transportation is on the agenda for the meeting of June 17th, and I wanted to provide the public with notice that there's a regional public hearing on the $1.9 billion worth of transportation projects that are currently before the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. And that public hearing is on June 20th at 5:30 p.m. in the council chambers in Fairfax City, which is located at 10,455 Armstrong Street in Fairfax. The council will get a briefing on the process and on the city's projects, which come out of our existing transportation plans. But some of those projects that the city has put forward for that regional planning effort include fixing the bridge on Van Buren Street, which is currently closed for pedestrian access because the steel structure underneath it has degraded, funding for bus shelters throughout the city, and trail lighting on the W&OD to connect it with East Falls Church Metro Station, and other pedestrian access improvements. The Falls Church total is $1.7 million, and we'll talk about that in more detail at your meeting on June 17th. Lastly, I just wanted to note for the public, and I think folks are well aware of this, but just noted at the outside of this meeting. Now, Bill Hicks has an item on the agenda, of course, tonight, but I wanted to note his recent announcement that he is leaving for an opportunity with Fairfax County, where he will be their Director of Maintenance and Stormwater Management. It is a significant responsibility with Fairfax County, and we will be very sorry to see him leave us. But he will be with us through July 5th, and we'll keep him very busy between now and then, and we'll also have an event that I'll get word out to the council where we'll be able to send him off and roast him a little bit and brag on him a little bit. He has come to the city with a very clear expertise in stormwater management. I believe when we hired him, we hired the best in the region in stormwater, and he leaves a great legacy in this area with our watershed management plan, with the council's action in April to establish a stormwater utility, and then continuing policy work that's on the agenda for council tonight. But in addition to the area of stormwater work, Bill has brought engineering expertise to transportation and to our facilities and to our infrastructure across the board. And we do have weather happening in the city tonight. Bill has always said to me he doesn't like emergencies. He likes order and like a good engineer. And I do know that in our work for emergency preparedness, Bill has liked and worked very hard to impose order in our emergency response. And if you look at our traffic signal management, when we have prolonged power outages, he has streamlined our process for getting generators deployed to be able to keep signals going through emergencies and backup power at the property yard, and many other standard operating procedures that allow us to work more effectively and serve the public more effectively. So we will miss him when he is gone. But he is on the agenda tonight, and wanted to just note that before we get to those agenda items. That is all I have to report tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shields. Council members, any questions for Mr. Shields? All right, thank you very much. We are now on to business on the agenda and second readings of matters. Ms. Bishop, you'd read the first item? And actually, why don't we read the two items together?
I'll be happy to, Ms.
But we'll vote on them separately.
Happy to. First one is 2013-14, ordinance to set the stormwater utility billing unit rate in accordance with Chapter 42, Article 7 of the Code of the City of Falls Church, Virginia. The next item is 2013-15, ordinance to establish a credit program in accordance with Chapter 42, Article 7 of the Code of the City of Falls Church, both before you on second reading, Council.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hicks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of Council. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I noticed that Mr. Duncan was taking pictures of the robotics demonstration earlier, and I hope he affords the same when the budget amendment comes up and we have Richard LeCondre. I am glad to be here with you tonight to present the second reading of TO 13-14, the adoption of a billing rate for our stormwater utility, and TO 13-15, the adoption of a credit program. We have been talking about stormwater with great gusto for the last 2.5 years. This is the last big conversation that we'll have in this room, I suspect, about the utility. We approved the utility on April 22nd of this year, and what was left to do after we approved that utility was to adopt a rate and adopt a credit program. We read this 2 weeks ago for first reading. It's been out for public comment, and as I checked in by close of business today, we had not received any written comments regarding this in the city clerk's office, but I'll refresh everybody about where we stand. TO 13-14 is the adoption of a billing rate of $18 per 200 square feet of impervious cover. The typical impervious cover on a residential lot in the city is 2,755 square feet of impervious cover, which translates to an annual bill of $252. That would be billed in half increments twice a year. That would raise the needed $1.6 million that was approved in our FY14 budget. That budget was seeded with $900,000. So the very first bill is not the first bill of the year, but it would take effect next June. So when it goes out for mailing and collection, mailing in May and collection in June, the first bill would come then. With this new budget, we would create a 4-person crew. We would add 2.65 office staff dedicated to stormwater, which would bring our total staffing level to 7.7 FTEs. and we would bring in about $2 million, fully debt-funded, of capital expense every year, half of which would go for water quality improvements to meet the stormwater regulations associated with the Clean Water Act and the Chesapeake Bay cleanup, and the new stormwater regulations in the state of Virginia. The other $1 million of that capital expense, fully debt-funded, is the $1 million of rehabilitation and reinvestment in our conveyance system and flood control system that is aging out, and we will need to spend about $80 million over the next 50 to 80 years on that system. Then the operating expense, so you've got staff and you've got contractual services, would be brought to bear to keep our existing system as functional as it can be so that we can weather storms like we're going to have this evening. TO 13-15 memorializes the credit program, which we have talked about, and there are 3 key components to this. But before I tell you what those 3 key components are, I'll mention that there is already reserved $100,000 to fund the credits that are received through this credit program in FY14. That's built into that $1.6 billion budget that was approved for the FY14 fiscal year. The credit program has 3 key parts. The first is that a property owner could receive a 30% discount for all impervious area that drains to a structural BMP. Structural BMPs have been built in the city for the last 10 plus years. So those, as long as they're in good stead, they are on our register, and they've met the privately owned, privately maintained BMP agreement, then they would receive credit for that drainage area. The second area of credit would be a 10% reduction off the entire bill for a stormwater pollution prevention plan that's approved by the city. For an industrial permit that's approved by the state, that would automatically receive that 10% discount. But we also want to make this accessible to folks who are not bound by an industrial permit. And so we would develop with a stakeholder group that would include the Utility Commission various stormwater pollution prevention or SWIP items that could come off of a menu that people would select and have that plan approved. Those items would include things like rain barrels and cisterns, rain gardens, specimen tree maintenance, nutrient management plan, hazardous management on site, dog waste management, outreach. There may be others. The list is not yet fully set, but that would be vetted through a stakeholder group as discussed. And that would, if you had an approved plan, you would receive a 10% discount across your whole bill. And then the last key component came out of discussions with council that said through development or otherwise, if a property owner wanted to go above and beyond code requirements to detain water for flood control and conveyance control, that we would give up to a 30% discount, and that would be based on a sliding scale depending on how much above and beyond a private property owner would go. So with that, those are the key items to the program, and you've got TO 13-14, which is the billing rate, and TO 13-15, which is the credit program, and I'll be glad to field any questions. We also have here with us Jason Widstrom, who is our key stormwater engineer and will be carrying this program forward, and Kathy Allen, who's our superintendent of public works. Both are here this evening.
Thank you very much, Bill. Questions for city staff on this? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hicks, again, for all your work on this, and to Jason and Kathy and all your staff. Just a couple of questions, even though we have talked about this, as you said, at great length. In conversations with some citizens since our last meeting, a couple of things arose. I just want to make sure that I'm stating it correctly. One had a question about the status of the sanitary sewer staff, the work, the effort. The impression they had was that when we hopefully move forward with selling the water system, that the sanitary sewer function would go with that. And I said, no, I don't believe that's the way it is. And am I right? The way I read lines 61 and 66, your staffing scheme here calls for a folding in of the sanitary sewer staff, is that right?
It's absolutely correct that the sanitary sewer program does not go with the sale of the water system. And there are FTEs that are job shared currently between the water utility and the sanitary sewer utility. Those FTEs do actually go with the sale. I mean, those positions are guaranteed with the water authority. So that creates some vacancies there to job share with what is in here. There's also a three-man crew that is fully sanitary sewer. That's all they do every single day. Those remain with the city. That would all be rolled into the Department of Public Works. And the synergies that can exist between sanitary sewer and stormwater are enormous, and we want to leverage those. So it's not just job sharing, but it's actual abilities and capacity sharing.
Okay, that's fine, that's what I understood. And also, the question that arose was about flex staffing for snow situations, storm cleanup and pickup. This staff would effectively become our flex staff to handle those things as they are handled now. Is that about right?
We are all very flexible in our abilities to share when emergencies strike. So these guys would not be, and gals, would not be unique in that manner. I will say today, or this past winter, when we have snow events, or the past history of our snow events in the city, we do borrow staff from the water utility. Those are rented, so the utility is made whole. We're not spending utility money to do public works work, but those bodies are essential to get into our trucks and push those plows down the street. As the utility is sold and moved away, this will create a resource that can be leveraged during those times, or a big storm event.
Okay, the other, following on to that then, given the synergies that you discussed, I'm sorry that I hadn't thought to ask this before. Why are we billing this? Why don't we bill this with the sanitary sewer bill rather than with the property tax bill? Let's just explain to people why they would pay that, because it's not going to be tax deductible. We know that. So why are we billing it with property tax instead of with stormwater, with the sanitary sewer?
Well, we talked at length about that, and it was chosen to move down this road, and so we've made a strong commitment to bill with the real estate bill. We do have complete control over the real estate bill within the city. We do have a deal, I don't know what better to say, but we expect that the sanitary bill will be billed on the water bill that will come from Fairfax County in the future. And we know with confidence that they will not carry the stormwater bill in the city. So not only have we chosen to go down this road, we know that as we move forward and the sanitary bill goes over there, we could not send the storm bill. Now, that's not to say that in a year or 5 years or 15 years, it may make more sense for the city to manage its own billing and combine those two bills. But at least in FY14, we have chosen a path, and this is where we're headed.
Okay, thanks. That's the answer to that question. I heard another question, gravel driveways. Are gravel driveways going to be deemed impervious or pervious surface just as a matter of practice in the new regime?
They are impervious, and what happens in a gravel driveway is that it gets compacted over time. And when you have a big rain event, water rushes off of those driveways just as quickly as it does off of an asphalt driveway.
Okay, that's the professional opinion, and that's why I asked. The only thing missing in this marvelous document is what I would call the Bill Hicks Rain Barrel Fund. And I'm only half kidding, but I agree with the language at line 138 that a robust stormwater program will encourage and provide a financial incentive for the positive efforts made on private properties to help solve the stormwater issues. I would like to see, and this resolution or this ordinance here is not the place, it's a budget matter, but I would like at a later date for the council to consider a financial incentive to encourage, subsidize, I guess is the plain English word for it, the securing and setting up and use of rain barrels on residential properties. I think it will have It will have an effect of getting more people to buy into the concept that we're trying to promote here, and it will, I think, have some practical effect. Obviously, it's not as much as the rain that comes off a parking lot or whatever, but that's something I do want to talk about later. I don't know whether you'll be here when we talk about that, but I appreciate your entertaining my questions about that up to this point, and I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to respond very quickly, and I don't see any reason why we should not continue that dialogue about how much we should subsidize rain barrels. They are certainly part of the solution. Rain barrels are right now, we have a very robust program with our neighboring jurisdictions, Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria, and the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. In that program, we already subsidize these barrels with all of the staff time that's given, and it is a substantial amount. Secondly, there's a grant program that is being put into place for lower income families to avail themselves of rain barrels in the city. Now, if that is not enough, you are the council, and you give us direction.
Other council members? Questions at this point? We'll take comments after I'm going to open it up for public hearing, and then we'll take comments and a motion.
I have a question or two for you, Bill. And again, as Phil said, thank you so much for all your good service over the years. I'm sure we'll vet you maybe a little bit more later, but it's much appreciated. Could you elaborate a little bit more on this 10% discount section? For example, one of the items says maintenance of an on-site specimen tree. What does that mean?
So if you have I met with the Tree Commission probably about 4 weeks ago, and one of the things they suggested at this meeting was that they have these trees around the city that are designated as specimen trees. I believe the number is roughly 45, give or take a few trees. These trees are specimens, they're big trees, they take a lot of stormwater management, and a way to encourage that those trees are preserved, that they are maintained in a way that's needed. Maybe a discount could be given in the stormwater pollution prevention plan, such that if you have a specimen tree on site, it's so dedicated, and you are doing the annual maintenance to keep it up in good stead, then you should take some credit for it, and here would be an opportunity to do it.
And so this 10% section here is at a later time, stakeholders will come up with the right amount and the right number and which things are most important, et cetera. These are just some ideas.
Exactly. This is not a total list. There could be things added to this. There could be things struck from this list. That stakeholder group could have that power. I saw a schedule today that puts this stakeholder group together the end of June, so within about a week and a half, 2 weeks, starts to put that together and starts to work with that group to solidify this SWIP.
Thank you.
Other council members? If I can get actually, let me go ahead and open this item up for public comment, and then we'll take a motion. Are there any members of the public that wish to address these two items? Ms. Bouchard, did we receive any written comments? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this up for public comment, and then why don't we take motions on both and then comments?
Mayor? Yep, I
Please.
move to adopt TO 13-14 on second reading, and move to adopt TO 13-15 on second.
Actually, why don't we take one motion at a time? Yeah.
All right. Move to adopt TO 13-14 on second reading.
If I can get a second on that motion, please. It's Mr. Kalin on the second. And then we can discuss both, and then we'll get another motion on the next one in just a moment. Any comments by council members on either of these items? Mr. Kalin?
I don't have no questions.
Your mic, please.
Add a little other angle to this. First of all, I want to compliment Mr. Hick. Water management skills and organizing a storm for tonight, very nicely done. Kudos to your management skills for that. You said that this had been a topic that we discussed with great gusto. I'm not sure I would use the word gusto. I would use it more, either the word endurance or tenacity, as for all the discussion we've had about this. And finally, you don't have to respond to this when we have the emotional farewells. You have to tell me which you enjoyed more during your stay here, doing the dumpster diving with Ms. Allen. I remember that as a feature of your tenure here, or whether it was the opportunity to do a camera colonoscopy of our water drainage system. So you can discuss those at another time, but I would like you to just think about that. Thank you.
All right, other council members? All right, Bill, Mr. Duncan.
Just a couple of editorial things on line 37. I think there's an extra the new stormwater fund, and on line 62, I think remainder of these, one of those is supposed to be a the. Since we're passing this for all time, just make sure we get the wording right.
None of those were in the ordinance, correct? That was all in the staff report? Okay, so I don't think we need to amend the motion, but, all right, thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Hicks, I just wanted to thank you for seeing this to fruition before you head out to other endeavors. This is something that, as far as stormwater management, I've mentioned a couple times now. Certainly, as I was first running in 2008, this was a major item that was affecting the city, and this is before some of the more recent storms that we've had. Certainly, I had made a commitment to try to do something about this issue, given that it's really a fundamental thing the local governments are supposed to be doing, and that's stormwater management, both on the volume side and the quality side. So I'm very happy to see that we've taken several steps in this direction. One, with increasing our maintenance of the system throughout the last few years, and providing the funds to do that, and now moving a bit further in creating the fund. And I know that there's more work to be done, but just wanted to express my support and also thank my fellow council members and staff for seeing this through and seeing it this far. I know that there's been a lot of dialogue back and forth, and certainly a lot of improvements that have been made to this as we've moved forward. But Mr. Hicks, I wanted to thank you and staff's leadership in just seeing this through. I know it has not been an easy process, to say the least, and there's been a lot of tenacity and endurance that certainly ensued, so thank you. And with that, if we can have the roll call vote, and this is on TO 13-14.
TO 13-14, the utility billing rate, Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalen?
Yes.
Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Mr. Tartar?
Yes.
Mayor Burke?
Yes.
Thank you, council.
If I can get a motion on 13-15.
Mayor, I move to adopt TO 13-15 on second reading.
If I can get a second, please. Is Mr. Kalen on the second? Any council member comments on this? All right. If I can have the roll call, please.
TO 13-15, Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalen? Mr. Pepe? Mr. Tartar? Mayor Burke?
Yes.
Thank you, council. The next item before you, council, is TO 13-13. This is an ordinance to amend the FY 2013 budget of expenditures and revenues of the general fund and the capital improvement fund by appropriating grant revenues, miscellaneous revenues, contingencies, and underspending in certain categories. Again, before you on second reading.
Thank you. Good. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, Council. Before you for second reading, it's the budget amendment as pointed out by the clerk. If you like, we can go through it by item, or I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Why don't we see if there's any questions? I think we've gone through the items in the work session. So questions, Mr. Duncan?
Just one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Also arose over the weekend. The temporary stand sales facility, $80 per permit fee. Is that covering what we discussed here not too long ago? People who are coming to us and asking to set up taco stands?
I think we may be on the wrong ordinance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is just on the budget items.
I'm sorry. You're right.
We'll get to the taco stands in just a minute.
Not my budget amendment.
All right. Anything else? All right. If I can, I'm going to go ahead and open TO 13-13 to the public. Any members of the public that wish to address this item? Shad, did we receive any written comments? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this item up for comment. Council, if I can get a motion, please. Ms. Berry?
Oh, you do it. Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TO 13-13 on second reading.
If I can get a second? Mr. Kalen on the second. Council, any comments or questions on this? If I can have the roll call, please.
It's some heavy lifting done.
On 2013-13, Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalen? Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Mr. Tarter? Mayor Baruch?
Yes.
Thank you, council. The next item before you is TO 13-12. This is an ordinance to amend and revise Chapter 15 in Part 2, Code of Ordinances, Article 2, Department of Development Services, Sections 15-20, 27, and 29, and Article 3, Department of Public Works, Section 15-36, Public Works Applications, Engineering, and Section 15-37, Public Works, Urban Forestry, to include updates to fees and language before you on first reading.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shields?
And council, I will just follow Mr. LeCondre's lead. This has been discussed twice at work session, and rather than going through each of the fees and a description of those, I'll pause for any questions. Taking Mr. Duncan's question first, I believe I'm going to need to get back with him. We have been looking at the permit requirements for a temporary food stand, and I don't have a report for the council yet on that issue, and I can't speak about the direct applicability of this fee to that situation that came before the council about 4 weeks ago. And so if I could get back with you on that.
Right, other council members? And Mr. Shields, while we're on that point, we did have a member of the public express some concerns about the permitting process and what's required and what needs to be done. I know this is a little off topic, but perhaps at the end of the business agenda, you could just report back on that if you do have a report, or we can talk about where that's going to fit within the schedule. Because
Okay.
I did see that as being a pressing issue, and I think council members had a commitment to try to move that along or try to figure out what the problem is so we can address it. So why don't we come back to that at the very end of the meeting? Anything further on this? Ms. Berry?
To Mr. Duncan's point, I thought that the issue of temporary stand and sales facilities was established here. I'm looking at line 382. Is it not? Do you see it, Phil? Line 382? $80 fee? Or are we discussing? But it seems to be codified here. Am I?
I guess the question is, does the fee address the other issues that were raised about whether
Which
they're
was the
permitted or
food
not
stand.
permitted? And that was the issue of
The
the
mobile
food stand.
food stand.
Why don't we see if there's any other comments
was it.
while
I just thought
council members, Mr. Shields?
Again, I'm not quite sure the answer to that question, so
Okay.
we will try to get the answer to that.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a fee that's being incorporated, but there may be other issues about permitting and other mechanisms of making sure that, we can have those types of trucks if that's the will of the council.
Yeah, I mean, the question that arose was in the context of, the person has a business license and the person has a food handling permit from the county, and right, Fairfax County, which handles that for us, of course. And so then we want to have our own fee, which is fine. How much is it? Is it annually renewed? Those are the questions.
And whether there's anything else in the ordinances that prohibit it or permit it, so
Right.
cleaning that up. Right, anything else, council members on this? Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and open this item up for public comment, and this is again TO 13-12. Any members of the public that wish to address this item? Ms. Bouchard, did you receive any written comments?
No,
I'm
sir.
going to close this item up for public comment. Council, if we can take a motion, and then we'll open it up for public comments. Or, I'm sorry, for council comments. Ms. Berry?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TO 13-12 on first reading, schedule public hearing and second reading for June 24, 2013, and advertise the same according to law.
Thank you. If I can get a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pepe.
There you go.
All right. Council member comments, Mr. Kalen?
Thank you. I support this. This isn't a question of support, and I don't have any questions about this. I did want to comment into one component of our work session comments that was a little preoccupying, and that was the issue of a fee for cafe seating. Now, it was at the table, or at the discussion, it was said, well, let's just remove it because we want to promote it, and why do we even need to have permitting? And if it wasn't for Mr. Tartar's intervention that says, well, you still have to regulate it to the extent that it can't consume the entire sidewalk, there may be issues between different owners of the use of the cafe seating. I don't have a problem per se because the amounts are small, but I am concerned about sort of making decisions or making proposals on something like that with not having done any analysis whatsoever, and this is a prescription for mistakes. So I would just suggest for the council going forward that we be careful of information or judgments we're making with not having analyzed it and maybe making a wrong decision. Sometimes we overanalyze. That's another issue that's more related to a desire often to delay, not really for more data. That's another separate issue we can discuss. But on that point stands out because that came up in this, and I think we were very close to making a mistake. I thank Mr. Tartar for bringing the issue that we did need to have some form of regulation. Thank you.
Other council members? Okay. And if we can have the roll call, please.
On TO 13-12, Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalin? Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Mr. Snight? Mr. Tartar?
Yes.
Mayor Brooke?
Yes.
Thank you, council. The next item before you, council, is TO 13-16, ordinance to amend Chapter 48 zoning, Article 5, supplementary regulations, Division 6, height, lot, and yard regulations, Section 1102, to bring development of existing substandard lots into closer alignment with the comprehensive plan of the city of Falls Church, Virginia.
Mr. Snyder?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you know, this issue of the redevelopment of substandard lots, particularly those which have a house on more than one lot, or what's commonly known as split lots, has been an issue here in the city for many years. In the Zoning Ordinance Advisory Committee report issued to the council in March of 2011, it was addressed as something that needed to be resolved and worked on. Later, you had a work session in August of 2012 with the Planning Commission and asked them to take a look at this for you. We presented a number of options at that time, including a change to the ordinance itself to clarify what should in fact happen. The Planning Commission held a listening session and did additional work and has recommended to you that the ordinance be changed. And you have before you tonight a recommendation to take to first reading, to advertise to first reading, that change in the ordinance. The zoning ordinance itself will be, if you go to the page 4, you will see the actual language that's proposed. And the intent of this is to require that contiguous substandard lots be considered combined for the purpose of administering all zoning regulations as of August 1st, 2013. If one home straddled or touched the contiguous lots as of that date, and that home used both substandard lots for setback purposes. Furthermore, the limitations of the paragraph would not apply to substandard lots for which there are 3 items that would be true as of August 1st, 2013. Again, this is at the end of the report. The substandard lots have been placed in separate ownership, and Arlington County land recordation of such has been completed and presented to staff. 2, a completed grading plan meeting all of the requirements of the City of Falls Church Code for the subject lots has been applied for and accepted by the city for review. And 3, a demolition permit for the house has been applied for. So that's the particulars of the proposed ordinance. But looking at why we would want to do this, in looking at the city's zoning and comprehensive plan, we find that some 67% of the city is zoned R1A and R1B. It's planned for low residential, either 4 units an acre or up to 6 units an acre. And when you do the math, you find that the substandard lots basically are over the density of the comprehensive plan. So over time, this will degrade the integrity of the comprehensive plan. We have found through our analysis, and you have in your package maps that show the various lots and the houses that may straddle these substandard lots. And on the screen, we've put together a simple diagram that shows, in essence, what goes on here. On the left-hand side is a house built on 2 lots. These were probably subdivided prior to the zoning ordinance. For example, if they were R1B, perhaps they're 40-foot lots or 50-foot lots, and they might have 6,000 feet apiece or something like that. The house has been there for a number of years. And under the present situation, that house may be torn down and turned into 2 narrower houses, somewhat shorter with relaxed setbacks, covering the same amount of square footage, but nonetheless 2 units. Under the new code, that would not be allowed. The house that straddles those lots would remain one house. Those lots would be considered combined. On the other hand, if a substandard lot already contains a house, such as the one on the right, it would not be affected. We have many substandard lots that are undeveloped. Those could continue to be developed. This is a narrowly focused effort to avoid having one house become 2, where one has existed for some time. So that's really the thrust of this: protect the comprehensive plan, the integrity of it, limit the redevelopment of these certain class of substandard lots where buildings, houses cover more than one lot line, and allow the continued practice of substandard lots, which are unencumbered, to develop under the other ordinance restrictions, which provide for slightly relaxed setbacks on the sides and reduced height of the buildings. The Planning Commission has unanimously recommended this. You know that there's been lengthy community debate about this. We feel now is the time to make this recommendation and go forward with a first reading and hold a second reading on June 24th, 2013. July 22nd, 2014. And effective date would be August 1st, 2013. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions. You have a number of pieces of material available to you that we've put together, and we think this is the appropriate time to move forward with this action.
Thank you very much. And I believe before we get started, Mr. Tartar had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, I represent members of the development community as an attorney. After deliberation and further study, it has come to my attention that the substandard lot amendment and the timing of its effective date may have an impact on some of my clients. Therefore, as a prudential matter, and after discussing this matter with the city attorney, I have decided to recuse myself from participation with this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tartar. All right, council members, so as we talked about in our work session, there's really 2 issues that we need to take up. One is whether we're going to move forward with this item or not, and 2, the issue of the effective date. So if we can just make sure that in our discussions, we focus in on those 2 issues, I think that's going to be very important for our discussional purposes today. And again, the effective date is not about how the public discussion goes, and certainly we can talk about that if needed, but the effective date actually has to do with essentially a grandfathering of when the ordinance would take effect. Okay, so any questions by council members? Mr. Kalin?
Grandfathering, you mean when the gate is closed?
That's correct.
Okay.
When the ordinance actually goes into effect. That was an issue we touched upon, but said we'd sort of discuss it tonight. All right. Mr. Pepe?
I'll discuss. I mean, I can't support this the way it's written, with the effective date the way it's written. I think it's a solution that does avoid some problems with creating overlays and non-conforming uses, so I understand why it may work. But the idea of just taking away rights from people strikes me as, well, I won't say whether it's legal or not, I'm not a Virginia lawyer, but it just strikes me as immoral for a government to step in and take things like this. And I can't support it without giving adequate time and an opportunity for people to take advantage of what had been the practice and had existed for a relatively long time, contrary to the assertions we hear. The courts have said consistently, and every opinion I've said has said this has been a consistent practice for a long time. People have made decisions based on something, and you can't just turn around and change that without giving people time to prepare adequately.
Other council members, and Mr. Pepe, I think we need to come back to, there may be other council members who have similar thoughts, but I think we would need to select a time as we move forward in the process, if we are going to move forward with this. Ms. Berry?
I don't know if it's appropriate to have a discussion with another council member, sort of ping-ponging it, but I'm not certain what other information could be brought to bear on this decision. I don't know that the date August 1 is any more magical than September 1 or December 1. I don't know what else could be discussed or how else people could prepare differently for what is, I think, a council decision to bring the zoning in concordance with the comprehensive plan. So what would more time give people an opportunity to do? But maybe I'm not supposed to do that.
It's very clear what it gives them. Like, just to respond to that, as I read this, and that's why I have a question, you tell me if this is wrong, it says this applies to, if certain situations are not met by August 1st, then it applies to any of the places on that list. And there are a lot of property owners who are directly affected. And August 1st is certainly not enough time to meet those conditions to, if they decide, well, I don't want to go this route, I want to take advantage of the value that was there when I bought the property, or that developed over the years, that other people got to take advantage of over the years. So if you spread it out a year, for example, you give people a time to decide, do I want to apply for a demolition permit and a grading plan? Those things can't be done by August 1st. It's very disingenuous for us to say, well, everybody has until August 1st if they don't like it, given that realistically people can't take advantage of it within that time frame.
Great. Other council members? Mr. Cameron?
I support the proposal going forward, but also support the idea that the August 1st timetable is too short. Information, even though it's been around for a long time, we discussed it, it may simply be too short. I do recall, I think I mentioned this to others, that when it was decided that we would have to get a cable box and there would be no more broadcast, after how many years, public explanations, advertisements in every media, when it was supposed to occur, 22 million people said they had no idea this was coming. I mean, it's just the way it is. So I think it's just going to take more time than August 1st. I don't know how long. I don't really have a sense. And one of the reasons I had not supported a study is that people will have to decide, do they want to move? What do they want to do? Do they have alternatives? It's a life decision, and they may not have been focusing on that until actually a decision had been made by legislatively on what we were going to do. So and I also support what Ms. Berry said. The support that I is because of the consistency with the comprehensive plan. That's the only reason that I can support it. It's for that purpose and that reason. Now, we'll have to have a discussion as to what's the right amount of time, and I think that's certainly a very valid issue.
Other council members? Mr. Duncan, do you have anything?
Well, I said a good bit about this the other night, and I know you'll be thrilled to find out that I'm not going to repeat any of that. I have talked about it in informal sessions several times since our meeting, some frank and open exchanges of views, which have been, I think, useful and productive. I guess I'm still in listening mode. I'd like to thank city staff for the FAQ that's up on the website, which I think has some good information. I've also enjoyed, been informed by reading the emails and the comments that we've received. And I think tonight I'm going to vote, to move ahead, to open this process up, as outlined. Planning Commission, if I understand it correctly, would have a public hearing on July 1st, second reading on July 22nd by council. So over the next month, we would hear more and discuss more and learn more. And I hear the comments of Mr. Pepe and Mr. Kalin, and I'm open to more information, I guess.
All right, thank you, Mr. Duncan. After looking at this and hearing the public comments, and certainly we'll get more public comments tonight, I'm favorably inclined to move this forward, but again, want to reserve my judgment until we hear our public on this. One thing I am particularly interested in hearing about tonight, and as we move forward, is this issue of the effective date. I think that's, I, again, want to be clear that I'm notionally supportive of this, but what I'm interested in getting comments about is what is the right effective date period, and what I'm going to be looking for is a balance. I don't want there to be sort of a rush to redevelop these lots. It's not what I'm looking for. I want to make sure that we're consistent with our comp plan, which this clearly attempts to address, and also does address. I know that we had some brief discussion about it during our work session regarding environmental impacts, specifically stormwater, and while the impervious lot coverage is not different because of the setback requirements and how the grading is going to get done on these situations where we have two homes on one lot, I think there are some impacts there that have yet to be quantified, and we've seen some of that throughout the community, and I think some community members have raised those various points, and also the amount of tree coverage you can have if the setbacks are not as wide per se. It will affect the type of trees and plantings you can do there. So I think that there are not only comp plan issues, but there are environmental impacts that this has that I'm sensitive to and of concern about. So again, I'm favorably inclined to go forward, but I do want to engage the public further on the discussion on the effective date. So John, while we're taking public comments, right now the ordinance does say June 1st, 2013. I think I'm hearing some members of the public, or some members of the council, that would want to keep that at least an issue that could possibly be longer, but nobody's throwing out any dates particular. I'm sorry, August 1st. It's on line 119.
Yeah, August 1st, that's August.
I'm sorry, August 1st, 2013. And we're going to be in first reading. So if there's a way of keeping that open until we have further discussion through the regular process beyond this date, I don't want to have one date and then we're back to first reading again. So if there's a way of leaving that open until we get back. So if you've got any thoughts on that, either feel free to share those now or after we take public comment.
There is a way to keep that open. The city charter treats zoning ordinance amendments differently than ordinance amendments generally, and the city council does have the flexibility to make changes, substantive changes, between first and second reading. We took that issue to Arlington County Circuit Court in 2008 litigation involving the hotel up on West Broad that's under construction now, and got a very clear ruling from the court that we do have the ability to make changes on zoning ordinance amendments between first and second reading.
Even on effective dates, John?
Yes.
Okay. So we could potentially go forward as it's drafted and then amend it between now and final passage?
We can make changes between first and second reading.
Okay. So, any thoughts on that, council? Given that we've got the flexibility to do that, just move forward with what we have and then
Fine.
change it between, once we get more public comment.
I still can't support that, but, obviously if you had the votes, you had the votes. So
Right.
I'm not going to vote for something I morally disagree with.
The other approach is that we set a date now and we could always change that later. So, that's, I mean, we've got the flexibility, either set it now, or set it for August, or set it at a future date, and then change it if we choose to later on. And we've got the flexibility. So the issue is really making sure that our public is commenting on that point. Mr. Canlon?
Just a clarification from Ron. Maybe I misunderstood you. But I thought you were saying that what really you objected to was the August 1st. You had some issues with it, but the key issue for you was that really that was not enough. Now, if that date were moved to what you may consider to be adequate time, you would still vote against it, or would that?
No. If we can pick a date that gives people adequate time to.
Okay, so
So you're not
We're not
morally
really-
opposed to the movement?
If we move ahead by saying, well, we can always change it later, I am. I don't like the idea of saying, let's approve it now because we can change it next time. I'm not going to vote yes for something because there's an option to change it again the next time. I'll vote for something that's correct to start with.
Well, yeah, I think part of the difficulty we're gonna have is figuring out what the correct is without getting all the public comments
Well,
in.
here's what happens when we play this game, just because, I've been doing this for 20 years. And when you put something out there, once something gets approved one way or the other, first reading, everybody then responds to what's there. And then if you change it again, the other people complain and say, well, I didn't realize it was going to be changed the second time. So I think it makes more sense to put something out there that is something a majority of us can support, and then we get comments on that, and then we see whether we change our mind. But to go out there with something that we say, well, we don't really have a lot of support for this, but let's put it out there, I think it invites a lot of misinterpretation and backlash from the public.
Yeah, that's, but, John, is there a way of drafting this in a way that their effective date is not in the ordinance, and getting public comment on that between now and first reading?
I think we need to have an effective date at the first reading point, but again, my message to you is legally we can make changes on anything in this ordinance between first and second reading, including to the effective date that ends up getting adopted. The point of the city charter that does allow for changes on zoning ordinances between first and second reading is to encourage and facilitate public input before you reach the final point of adoption. And so that's why we've got a public hearing before the Planning Commission that's scheduled to be held. That's required by Virginia Code. And we have this final hearing on second reading that I believe is set for July 22nd. So, but to answer your question, Mayor, we do need to have an effective date in this first reading ordinance. We can't leave that blank.
So that answers the question. So what I would suggest is perhaps picking something in the middle, because I don't think we want to be in a situation where we pick something, that's a year out and we get comments and public input asking for something shorter, and I don't think that helps the dialogue. So perhaps something in the middle, 6 months, dare I say, and then we can get public comment on that now, and certainly we can expand it or shorten it, maybe the way to go. But I just offer that for food for thought. Other council members? Ms. Berry?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think thank you, Mr. Pepe, for, as always, being straightforward and forthright. I think the critical steps tonight are to signal in no uncertain terms that this will move forward. So let all be aware that it would appear that council is ready to move this initiative forward. So there will be no confusion about development of substandard lots from here on out. Punto. Right?
Period.
No, period. Everybody, that's point A. What that effective date is, I don't know if it's August 1, I don't know if it's December, I don't know what it is, but if that seems to be a sticking point, and, I take Mr. Pepe's point that, people need more than 2 months to make a decision now that they know council is moving in this direction. Let's split the difference and say 6 months, if we can make a change. But I think critical to tonight's meeting is signaling that this is in front of us. Commissions, boards and commissions have unanimously supported this initiative. Staff has supported this initiative. If we have the votes, council tonight is going to support this initiative. Let there be no confusion. We are moving forward with changing this this loophole in our current affairs, and we are going to bring this city initiative, we're going to bring our planning in concordance with the comprehensive plan done and done. So, you know, I'm happy if we can get concordance on December 1, given that that's 6 months since the beginning of this, I'm happy to do that. I don't really have an answer, and I think it's in some ways, it's a little odd to be affecting a date, waiting for public input. Maybe that date's not a good date, but if that date allows us to move forward tonight, I'm certainly happy to support it.
Other council members? All right, why don't we begin the public hearing, and perhaps we'll have more input and can come back to this as well. So I've got several speaker slips, and then I'm happy to take comments from other members of the public who are here. And we'll take a motion at the end of the public hearing process based on what we hear back this evening. The first speaker slip that I have, and each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak, and if you just please state your name and your address for the record. The first speaker slip that I have is from Mr. Bill Baskin, followed by Mr. Stephen Raskin.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Bill Baskin, 301 Park Avenue. I have 2 current clients who are going through this process to develop each separately substandard lots. The way the ordinance is currently drafted, it looks like they may fall, they may meet the criteria that are set forth that would enable them to go forward. But that's not to say that I don't have some significant concerns about it. I think you ought to consider one thing, the timing of this. This is being brought forward at the end of a school year where people are very busy, at the beginning of a summer where people are taking summer vacations and leaving town. And it's planned to go to second reading on July 22nd and be effective August 1st. Well, even if a property owner today decided to try and meet these 3 criteria, I think you'd be very hard pressed to accomplish that by August 1st, starting now, because you have to have grading plans, architectural plans, engineering work done. There's a lot of things that go into putting a property owner in the position to do this. So I would urge you to consider expanding just the timing of when you take this up. That's a separate issue from the August 1st date, which I think if that's a sunset provision, we ought to look more toward daylight savings time, because that's really short. I think more time needs to be allowed for people to be able to decide that if they have purchased their property with the expectation that they would be able to follow an historical pattern, the way the city has always treated these lots, then they need more time to be able to digest that and to act accordingly. A couple other points I'd like to touch on. And I hope this will get some analysis as it goes through the process. The memo from the Planning Commission stated that there have been many instances of adverse impact on neighborhood character as well as excessive stormwater runoff. That was stated as a conclusion. I'm not sure what facts are underlying those conclusions, but I would hope they would not be just accepted at face value and would be examined. I mean, just from my casual driving around the city, I think these neighborhoods where there's been new development like this are very appealing and aesthetically pleasing, and I don't see an adverse impact from it myself. With respect to the need to do this in order to bring the current circumstances in conformance with the comprehensive plan, I'd suggest there's another way to view that or to look at it. The comprehensive, let me back up, the zoning, many of these lots are in R1B zone. They have a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet. Most of the substandard lots are 6,000 square feet. If you say that you can no longer develop 2 substandard lots, you're imposing a 12,000 square foot requirement, which is even larger than the 11,250 square foot minimum for the R1A. So I think you need to question whether the comprehensive plan is really being eviscerated by the way the ordinance is currently being applied, and whether this change will really bring this situation into compliance with the comprehensive plan, or whether this would actually take it farther out of compliance with the comprehensive plan. Just a final note, because I know my time is up. These lots, many of these lots were subdivided long before the city zoning ordinance. A lot has changed since then. A lot of these lots are up in the West End within walking distance of the metro station. That's a factor that's changed, and I don't know how much that change has weighed into the viewpoint about density and whether it's more appropriate to have a 12,000 square foot lot in such proximity to the metro station, or whether to perhaps consider higher density. I hope you'll consider all of these factors as you go forward, and will at least slow the process down and give people more of a chance to evaluate it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker slip that I have is Stephen Breskin, followed by Art MacArthur.
Good evening. My name is Steve Resnick, 1910 South Nelson Street in Arlington. As an Arlington resident, obviously, I'm not here to argue one way or the other, tell you whether or not you should be adopting this ordinance change. However, I do have a dog in the fight to the extent that I am a builder, and I currently have an affected lot under contract scheduled to go to closing at the end of this month. Given that time frame, I think I probably could meet the August 1st deadline. But I'm here to speak for the people, the property owners and potential builders and buyers who aren't at the stage that I'm at yet. I think regardless of what side of this issue you're on, I don't think there can be any argument that there's going to be a significant negative impact on the value of the lots that are affected by this change. Just the value of one large house versus what you could sell two smaller houses for, you're not going to, the people who own these lots are not going to be able to sell them for as much. Now, I attended the planning meeting last Monday, and I heard arguments from several council members, and I've heard them again tonight, that, well, this issue has been debated to death for at least the last, 6 or 7 years. And therefore, everybody should know about it, everybody should have an opinion about it, and therefore we should just go ahead, slam the gate shut. I would argue that the fact that this has been debated over and over and over again over a period of several years lends credence to the fact that the council should slow down. If you want to adopt the change, that's fine, but hold off on the implementation. Because if you don't mind the analogy, at least with regard to this issue, the council has been sort of like the boy who cried wolf. It sounds like the council came very close to adopting a similar change to the ordinance back in, I believe, 2006. Should these property owners have run out then and sold their property? Well, if they did, they would have sold into a down market. Back in 2011 or 2012, when this was debated again, should they have run out? When they hear about this meeting tonight, should they run out and start the process to sell their property? Stop and think about this for a second. Let's assume that this council, and it sounds like you do want to adopt this change. I'm assuming that you're going to give some notice to the affected property owners, let's say via certified mail. Let's just assume that tomorrow you put all those letters together, you get them to the post office, those letters go out, let's say the property owners get them by the end of this week. Okay, between then and August 1st is 7 weeks. But again, the property owners, given the council's history, how do they know that this change is really going to take effect? So you're saying the second reading, when this potentially could be adopted, would be July 22nd. From July 22nd to August 1st is 1 week. All right? Stop and think about what you have to do if you're a property owner who gets one of these letters. You've got to make the decision, okay, I want to sell. You've got to hire a real estate agent. You've got to clean up the property. You've got to list it. You've got to find a buyer, negotiate a contract. The buyer, assuming he's not walking around with loads of cash in his pocket, has got to get financing put together, has got to get an appraisal done. You've got to go to closing. You've got to put together a building plan. You've got to put together a grading plan and a site plan, then submit it. You also have to do the legal work to split the lots and record that. Now, like I said, I'm barely going to make that with a contract that was put in back in the middle of May, all right? For people who aren't going to get notice until, let's say, the end of this week, to do that in 7 weeks, or for the people who are saying, look, the council has talked about this before, we don't really believe this is going to happen. Until they actually hear that it's been adopted, that can't happen in 1 week. So you're basically, if you keep the August 1st date, you're effectively throwing down the gauntlet and locking the gate as of now. So I would simply surmise that I think if the council is going to adopt this, slow down in its implementation. Have a sunset provision. I think 1 year is reasonable. It's going to spread out the sale of properties, because that's another issue, and I did raise it with several council members last week, that if you put too short of a date on this, you're going to panic people, all right? And they're going to make emotional decisions instead of rational decisions. And if you have too many people running out selling properties, thinking, oh my God, we got to meet this deadline. Well, as a builder, that would be great for me, okay? Because we all know what happens when there's a glut of something on the market. Prices drop, all right? I'd love to be able to buy properties cheaply. But for the property owners who have been holding these properties and relying on the previous zoning administrators' rulings or interpretations, and relying on what they think the value of their property is, if they've got to rush out and make this emotional decision and sell, it's going to drive those prices down. It's going to harm your constituency. I say spread this out, take your time. Again, if you want to adopt it now or adopt it in July, that's fine, but I seriously would suggest putting at least a 1-year sunset provision in the change.
Thank you very much. The next speaker slip that I have is from Mr. Art MacArthur, followed by Richard Mayland.
As you all know, I've even gone through this in my previous life, and you know, in kind of mulling this over, you know, personally now we really don't have any stake in the issue because you know we're living in our house. But I do think that it's important to note that this has gone through the court system twice now, and it's been appealed to the Supreme Court. So a whole bunch of judges have actually weighed in and stated that the zoning administrator is consistent in his findings, and the rule of law has weighed in. So now you're going to sit here and change something legislatively that you know you can't do administratively because the courts have already decided. It sounds to me like they're trying to just kind of slip one in, which is very uncomfortable to know that this is how you want to get something effectively changed, when the reality is now, where nobody can really take you to court anymore because it has been decided, you're going to change something so people on the other side can now take you to court for changing it. I mean, if the City of Falls Church likes to be in these legitimate situations, I understand, but I would really think that why change anything? It has been decided. You don't have to rule. You don't have to change anything. And for the most part, the affected property owners here are the ones that are going to lose in this change. They're the ones that have, for years now, have bore a higher tax burden than those that don't have these type of lots. And you're going to take that away from them. What do they get in return? The Planning Commission has, in my view, done a disservice to these folks because they haven't gone out and notified them. One of my comments during the Planning Commission meeting, which was conveniently left out of their notes, was that I stated, you need to notify each owner before you do anything. I got a lot of head nods, but nobody got notified. So I sent out postcards to everybody because I feel that these folks have to know. They got to know what's going on in the city. So you're going to get more people that are going to be alerted to this. But in the end, if I had to say, just going through the entire process, and you want to make a change, a year to 2 years, that's what I'm looking at. Because people have to have time to make these decisions. You shouldn't make rash decisions. And even with the development of these lots, there's only usually 3 to 4 a year that occur. I mean, it's not like it's been a mass wholesale and rebuilding of the City of Falls Church. But personally, I like what's happening. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker slip that I have is from Mr. Richard Maynard, I believe, followed by Mr. Dan Maller. Yes.
Hi, my name is Richard Maynard. I live at 611 East Columbia Street. I'm a veteran of, I call the subdivision wars. I have property that borders on 406 Van Buren, which would be applicable to this change in the ordinance. And I have to say that I coordinated the effort, and in terms of public notices sort of thing, there were probably 80%, but we had 40 neighbors within probably a few hundred yards of that property that all came together because of one issue, and that is we want to know, and some of you know that I'm probably going to be leaving the city soon, but even the people that are looking to buy my house want to know what the nature of the community is going to be. What is the nature of the neighborhood going to be? Now, a lot of us have looked at the comprehensive plan and the attempt to translate that into an ordinance that hasn't been developed because the city staff has not either had the incentive or encouragement to do it, that right now the status is that any of these lots that are subdividable will be developed. And so in terms of what is going to be the nature of these neighborhoods, you, not the city staff, not the city attorney, you alone have the political stake, if you want, and the interest to decide whether or not we're going to maintain the quality of these neighborhoods. And so, as I've written to you, each of you before, I urge you to take charge and to make the big decisions, because you are actually deciding a lot of the character of the neighborhoods in which I have lived for 17 years, and people who come after me live, and they want to have a sense of a small city. They want to have the good schools, but they want to live in a place that is pleasant. And you have to, and it may be that we want to be a city that would pack all these houses in, but that's the decision, the big decision you have to make is what kind of character is the future of Falls Church going to look like. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker slip that I have is from Mr. Dan Mallard, followed by Mr. Gordon Thies.
Members of the council, thank you. Dan Maller. I am the owner of 2 substandard lots at 308 Walnut Street. I want nothing to do with developing these lots separately. We should have done this a long time ago. It's time to make a decision. If I came to you with a proposal to build 200 housing units that would be highly attractive to families with school-aged children, you would consider it a highly risky enterprise for the city, and no doubt you'd ask many critical questions and seek to mitigate the downside risks while asking what the upside is. Well, I think others during the course of this next several weeks or months are going to debate that issue, and you probably have enough already. I could spend way too much time talking about fiscal impact, but I gather that for tonight you've gotten past that. And I think especially in light of the bruising budget fight you just went through, I'm sure that all of you are very sensitive to those fiscal issues. What I do think I can offer is a little bit of perspective on litigation here. I was here in 2006, sitting where you are, when we were considering a minor tightening of the standards for building height. One of the leading Virginia land use attorneys warned it would be unconstitutional and threatened to sue for Mr. Anton Schaefer. Well, we did adopt that piece of legislation that I wrote, and Mr. Foote, one of the leading land use attorneys in Virginia, did bring suit. The case resulted in a reported decision in 2010, the only opinion issued by the Virginia Supreme Court in any of these cases, finding no concern at all about how the city legislated, either as to uniformity or equal protection. So this is a policy question for you. The only other litigation that resulted in an opinion of a judge is Smith v. Frazier, which I argued for the city, and that resulted in an Arlington Circuit Court opinion finding that illegal subdivision of property justified and supported Doug Frazier's decision not to issue a building permit. There are no other court opinions, though there have been a series of BZA cases which resulted in one decision, a 2-to-1 decision in favor of an appeal. Short of the 3 votes required to overturn, and then Mr. Maynard was referencing a case recently where a short-staffed and conflicted out BZA refused even to consider appeals signed by 20 or more citizens. So obviously litigation is a very blunt instrument and not the way to develop policy. What these cases have revealed is a serious lack of process and serious lack of attention to the consideration and implementation of policy. And that's, again, what Mr. Maynard was just discussing, is the decision before you is not who has sued who, but what's the right thing for the city. And the only thing accomplished by all this litigation is the decision that the city can do what the city chooses to do. You're the policymaking body. So over these next 2 months, you're going to have to consider all this information. You know, we have a comprehensive plan. In these respects, it hasn't been changed since it was first adopted. You have recommendations from 2006 from the ZORS Committee, 2011 from the ZOAC Committee, the 2013 Planning Commission recommendation of this change, all of which require a change in the policy that's been pursued by staff. I thank you for bringing this legislation forward, and I encourage you to adopt it and adopt it on second reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon Thies? And the last speaker slip that I have is Mr. Paul Parrott.
Good evening. My name is Gordon Thies, 802 Ridge Place. I think everyone in the room knows where I stand on this issue. If you don't, please vote yes. That's what I'd like to see you do. That's what a lot of people that talk to me would like to see you do. Certainly not everyone in the city agrees, but a lot of people do. I want to make sure that you all received an email I sent last night with a budget model that was crude, and I'm a doctor, not a city staffer, so I apologize for that, but it was the best I could do. Because I think the budget implications of all 230 lots, even though I know that that's not possible, but you added 230 extra houses to the city, how much of a negative impact that would be on the budget, and how much more the citizens that are here, like me, would have to pay to educate just the children. You know, the staff and the Planning Commission, the ZOAC and the ZORS, and a lot of other people agree. It's been debated, and I appreciate all of you for hearing this case. Personally, I'm okay with the delay in the implementation. August 1st, December 1st, I don't care. I noticed this problem in 2005, and I stood before your predecessors and pointed it out. We had meetings. My goodness, Dan Z was running for council then, and he's running again. Okay? That's how long it's been. This is not a new issue. Okay? It's also been said that this is a long-standing policy of the zoning department. That's not true. Prior to 2005, there were only 2 properties that I know of that had been split. One of them has a house that Mr. Pepe lives in. Okay? In around 2002, 2001, the zoning department recognized the problem. The city attorney issued a memo that said this is a potential problem. Council ought to do something. Nobody did anything. And then it wasn't until 2005 that I noticed the splitting problem that things came on. So this 1954 ordinance came in, as Mr. Snyder said, because people back then bought these small lots and put them together and put a house on. They might buy 2, they might buy 3 or 4. And the 1954 council likely thought, well, gee, if you have a house on 2 lots and you have a 3rd lot, we don't want to restrict your property rights. We all talk about property rights. We don't want to restrict those and say you can't ever develop that. So that's why there are a bunch of individual lots around, and nobody's saying you can't develop those. What we're saying is that you can't create orphaned lots, which is the nice little loophole created by our own city staff. So with that, I just want to tell you the positives to approve this ordinance. I think it's really nice that they're looking at the comprehensive plan and the density, and that's really where it comes down to. That's where you have your rock-solid base to make this decision. But I think you need to look at the budgetary costs. I think you need to protect the environment. I think you need to protect those of us who already live here, as opposed to those who buy and profit from the splitting of these lots, and then we pay for their profit. Thank you very much. Vote yes.
Thank you. The next speaker slip that I have is from Mr. Paul Parrott.
Good evening. My name is Paul Parrott. I live at 319 North Van Buren Street, and I came to thank you for getting this on the agenda and moving forward with it. As Mrs. Berry, you said, we're closing a loophole, I hope. And I think we have to look historically at why this was created in the first place. And it seems to me that the important consideration is, was this ordinance earlier initiated to preserve density in the city. And if that's the case, then the master plan seems to corroborate that this is simply a loophole that people are profiting from at the expense of the community. And I think that's why we need to move forward and close it. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public that wish to address council? Please come forward, just state your name for the record and your address, please. Always good to see you, Charlie.
Good evening. My name is Charles Plymeyer. I live at 115 West Marshall Street, and I have a couple comments to make. I'm undecided on the substandard lot situation, mainly because of a couple things. One, what I'm seeing happening over, say, on Cameron Street with huge houses, they're way too big. And I'm a realtor saying that, and I'll stand by that. The development of homes in the city are typically over $1 million. 1.4 million, 1.5 million. They're big, they're massive, and I think they're causing a lot of problems. So whether we adopt or not adopt this situation, I think the developers are going to find ways to get around their development. And I think the change to the city is going to be enormous over the next 5 or 10 years because of its proximity to Washington and the metro. So density is the real issue. And of course, it comes with lots of other issues. You can say that, for example, you're going to create 240 extra homes with X amount of children. Well, you're in disbelief if you think that children situation is not happening right now with condominiums. So, you know, you're going to replace one sort of density with another. And I see lots of issues with that. But I am the owner of a substandard lot. It's on that map grid there. And my lot is 6,750 square feet, I think. So I have a stone cottage, which I have no intention of tearing down or ever letting anybody tear it down. But I now have got the burden of significant variance restrictions to meet, along with hardship, to put on a kitchen addition that's 5 feet more in depth. I haven't even done it yet because I've been wondering, should I invest the $30,000 or $40,000 for 40 extra square feet? Yes, it's going to cost that much because it's a small thing. And the only way I can go back is go back, but that's not going to work. It won't work architecturally, it won't work environmentally, it just won't work. So I'm restricted because I purchased a substandard lot over 20 years ago. And that lot next to me was subdivided, and it's caused lots of problems in the way I have to strategize where I put my money and where I build. So my option, tear the house down and put a big house, but I may be restricted because of a substandard lot. So the amount of money that I can make from my home is some limitations, and I'm concerned about that as a property owner. At the same time, I'm concerned that we are overbuilding and building way too big houses, which frankly leads to a class society in this city where everybody is going to be rich or everybody's going to have a tax bill exceeding $12,000 to $14,000 a year. And if you don't think that's significant, I will take you to Chappaqua, New York, where a $700,000 house is typically $18,000 to $20,000 a year in real estate taxes and going up. So I'm undecided on this because I think there's some underpinnings of this, some upside down pieces of this that haven't been really looked upon, for example, like a person like me. Should I spend the money to develop this addition? If I do, will I still end up being the smallest house in the block because something's going to happen and I'm going to be surrounded by homes like on Cameron? If I was next door to one of those two homes on Cameron, I got to tell you, and you all know me, I'd be out there in the street yelling and screaming. I'd be mad as hell because those houses are ugly. They are a detriment to that community. They're in a border floodplain, and they're causing lots of problems. If that's the type of city you want, you're going to get it. But you better be careful on how you legislate this. And I think you're wise to extend the timer. And by the way, I'll go on record that I'm not for big McMansion houses. They cause lots of problems, and frankly, I think they'll be albatrosses in about 10 or 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I believe I saw one other. Please come forward and just state your name and your address for the record.
Good evening, I'm Rosemary Donaldson, and my house sits squarely in the middle of two substandard contiguous lots at 109 West Marshall. I'm coming from this, I guess, from a different angle. It does concern me that we might pass this legislation and then get huge houses, you know, for our efforts, and I am a little worried about that, and I hope you'll really look hard at that. But I do support this. On a teacher's salary, there are months when I think, gosh, I'm paying a lot of taxes. Should I really be doing this? Should I really be here? But I love my green space, and I think we're losing that everywhere in the city. And I disagree that when you walk the neighborhoods, you're seeing things that are pleasing to the eye. I don't think we are. I think we've lost a lot in this city. And we need to start thinking about how we can preserve green space. And I'm not sure, I think that some of that is behind this effort, and I don't know whether it will do it because of the concerns that are being raised here. But we need to figure out something, I think. We're seeking, I believe, habitat certification as a city. We need to be thinking about how to move forward with that and to keep this a pleasant place to be, because I moved here for that reason 23 years ago, and I do think we're losing it. So please do press forward, but please do consider carefully all of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe those are all there's one other speaker. Please come forward and if you'd state your name and address for the record.
Evening. My name's Kevin Strickler. I'm a property owner on Lincoln Avenue. I was born into this city 60 years ago. First, I would like to thank the City Council for revising the proposed ordinance to include vesting language dealing with applying for demolition permits and grading plans. However, the schedule calls for adopting this ordinance on July 22nd, and the vesting must occur just 10 days later. By August 1st, there simply isn't enough time, and I would ask that you allow more time. Real estate transactions take time to complete. They involve real estate agents, lenders, appraisers, attorneys, and others who are all busy. In addition, the requirement for a grading plan requires surveyors, engineers to develop plans. That takes time. Please revise the ordinance to allow a realistic and reasonable amount of time for property owners who are in the middle of transactions. I am also opposed to the ordinance because it takes away property rights and it is contrary to smart growth principles. By redeveloping these properties, it is accommodating growth where there is existing infrastructure and mass transportation instead of new greenfield development. The ordinance also ignores the differences in character and density between the areas where these lots are located in Falls Church. In the case of Lincoln Avenue and the adjacent streets of West Street, Pine Street, and Highland Avenue, these lots have already been redeveloped. To the rear of our property, high-density townhouses exist. The proposed ordinance is a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't take into consideration that some areas are already of a higher density regardless of what the comprehensive plan may indicate. Lastly, why does Falls Church want to stop the redevelopment of this obsolete housing? The same lot coverage requirements apply whether it is one or two lots, and Falls Church reaps benefits and tax revenues when these lots are developed with two homes instead of one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bouchard, I believe that you've already summarized the comments that we've received on the ordinance, so I'm going to go ahead and close this item up for public comment. Council members, any further comments before we take motions up?
You're gonna make more comments after the motion, or?
Well, I suggest we make comments now and have a bit of discussion before we take up the motion. Mr. Pepe?
I'll start off. I think there are a lot of legitimate arguments and emotions in particular on both sides of this argument. A lot of people have strong viewpoints, some of which are grounded in fact, and some of which are based on emotions and feelings about the way things should be, or the way things should look, or aesthetics. And you never want to debate on aesthetics because people have different ideas on what's right. I do think, in having seen over the years, dealing with a lot of similar type issues that have a huge impact on everybody in the community, you have to be very careful that there are quite often unintended consequences to any action. We've heard some of that tonight. And the way you deal with that is you try and attack the problem as directly at the source as you can, as opposed to stepping back and saying, let's take this blanket approach to do this. So that's where some of my reservations come from. And an example, I know we hear a lot about the environment, and there are legitimate concerns about runoff. There are also already regulations in place about water runoff and things leaving the lot, and setbacks and coverage and maximum permeable surface. And if those things aren't being enforced and there are problems, we should enforce those things. I mean, this is going to get political, but it's a lot like the gun laws. We can create a lot more laws, or we can enforce the ones we have on the books. And maybe that's the place that some of this should have been started at, or maybe it isn't working for some reason. We need to go back and look with that. I understand the comprehensive plan issue, which is the only reason why I'm willing to say, fine, let's come up with a way to phase this in. I don't agree with the current comprehensive plan. Having grown up in a state where I worked a lot with government based on smart growth, you put your dense stuff near where you can walk to metro and public transportation, and we seem to be flying in the face of that. The other issue we have on this unintended consequences, what you will end up with, having dealt in real estate all my life, is you will end up with large houses on these lots. Just like the regulations they passed to lower the height restrictions mean the houses spread out to fill every square inch you can, whereas before you could actually have something tall and have some green space around it. That's what's going to happen. I look, and people have different feelings about these big houses, but that's what you're going to end up looking a lot more like. And that says a lot about who can afford to move here as well. I look at the two big houses across the street from me. I couldn't afford to live in those houses. What's that say about teachers and things like that when we're trying to find other kinds of affordable housing? This flies in the face of doing things in that direction. At the end of the day, one of the comments we heard was about protecting people who already live here, and that's what's motivating where I'm coming at from this. Because we also have people whose stock portfolios got tanked in the economy, and they're not in a great place to retire, but they said, hey, I've got this lot I can sell, and in 10 years when I retire, I've got something to count on. Well, we're taking that away. So I think we owe it to everybody to give them a chance to either make a decision to move on that or not. And that's why my compromise proposal, and I'd love to offer an amendment, is to change the 2013 to 2014 and say August 1st, 2014. Everybody seems to think, while that's still changing things, it's enough time for people to work through the process and decide what they want to do. I still have reservations about it. I still think it's taken a lot away, but at least it's a lot more fair than what's on the table right now.
Other council members? I'm happy to share my thoughts, and and I think I mentioned this at the work session, and I'll mention it again this evening. I'm going to be basing my decision in large part on the comp plan and certainly the environmental issues, and I'm glad that we're hearing from staff and council members about trying to bring the code in line with the comp plan. But as I mentioned before, the council and previous occasions, not this council, but future, past councils had a way of changing the comp plan where it needed to be changed in order to fit a particular project, and I don't think that is the right way to go. So I find it refreshing that we're trying to actually bring the code in line with the comp plan, which I think that's the best way to do things. It's a general policy matter, so I'm glad to see that happening in the city at this point. I do share some of Ron's concerns, and certainly we heard it from our citizens, that this could have, I don't want to call it unintended consequences, but nonetheless consequences of having large homes on these lots, because there could be economic advantages of doing that if we do make the change, and that may incentivize people to build the larger homes where one home existed rather than two. And again, my hope is that we will look at some smart growth approaches that as this moves forward, we start actually looking at areas in the city and overlay districts where we may actually want to allow the splitting of the lot, or taking one home and having two smaller homes in areas that are closer to Metro. I think the problem that we have now, looking at the map, it's sort of clustered in various places that don't make a lot of sense. So I hope with Mr. Snyder's help and our planning director, he's got a lot of good experience in Arlington, we can begin to think about some overlay districts where we may want to have different housing types, and we want to actually maybe encourage some of the redevelopment that we're seeing closer to Metro, and giving folks the affordability to be in the city, smaller homes, sort of unique situations. But rather than having that just in various places that aren't there for any smart growth reasons, but are there because of just economic reasons and historical reasons of how the various lots were split. So I hope we can do that moving forward. I did take, one comment that struck me as very interesting and helpful as I was sort of thinking through the issue of the effective date, and that's, we don't want to set this too short and kind of have a flood and a panic where everybody feels like, wow, they now have to knee-jerk sell their lots in order to take advantage of something, and if they had more time to deliberate, they may make other decisions. I don't, that struck me as a very, very good point and something for us to think about. And also, I'll just point out to staff, we do need to make sure that the notice requirements, whatever they are legally, are being met. So I'll just put that as a follow-up for if staff can just make sure that that's getting done if it hasn't been. Ron suggested the August 2014. I think that makes sense. To me, I would certainly support that if that's what's put forward. And then, the public process will go through, and it sounds like we've got the ability to adjust it upward or downward from that time frame, but a year right now has appealed to me based on what I've heard so far. Other council members, Mr. Kalin?
Thank you. I don't think, many of the people who spoke talked about the need for, I think we had passed that almost within the first couple of minutes, that it was going to be later than August 1st. A year, fine. No one really knows what the right amount of time is, but okay, we can pick that. I think my view of human nature is this is, even with, some people cannot come to closure, period. So you give them a year or not, they will still be struggling in 11 months to decide, and will feel pressured to make a decision. But so you have to live with the fact that it will be some individuals who, it will never be enough time. That we have to be able to say there is a limit to how far we can go. I think the sort of down-home analysis done by Mr. Thies and supported by others, I think it was nicely done, and you had all the necessary caveats in your analysis. The fact of the matter is, you can, a quick visual of the key that was sent out, the maps indicate that it can't be 240. There's some that just can't fit. You look at them in the way the houses are located and so forth. Even if they wanted to, it's not subdividable. And in the end of the day, these are lifestyle changes, and then you'd have to really get into the demographics of the people who are moving to see if they would be actually interested, because you get to a certain age and you don't want to move because the money doesn't mean that much to you. So you're already well into your retirement, so you're not going to do it anyway. We don't know. So it's very hard to make a prediction with something that is so individualistic as a decision-making on what do you want to do with the rest of your life if we're using this as a retirement option. I do think we should follow the comp plan, and I think a year certainly seems enough time for people to be alerted. Will there be people coming in 11 months and saying, I need more time? I can guarantee it. I can guarantee that's going to happen. Mr. Pallmeyer had a very interesting point, which, as a finance guy, I think I may understand, but maybe not, we can have an offline discussion, but you were mentioning that in 10 years, there may be housing stock issues by the type of construction. And I don't know that's limited to Falls Church. There may be housing stock issues in Northern Virginia in 10 years because of the nature of the way the economic structure of the United States is developing. So it's going to be a very interesting few years, but it's not particular to us.
Demographics is going to change the size of dwellings.
I mean, I'm just saying that you have, I think, a valid point, but there's no one, we don't know today exactly how that's going to play out. But I do think you're onto something with that point. My view is to support the proposal, give it a year, and hear what the people, the citizens say when it's discussed in public fora.
Any other members of council? Mr. Barry?
I'm happy to support Ron's friendly amendment.
Well, I think it would be we haven't taken
wait,
a motion
should
yet.
that, should that happen?
No motion yet.
No motion yet. I do want to, I guess, go back to my original remarks and say that if there's one thing that this council can do, the previous councils have not done, and I think it is absolutely incumbent upon the folks here on the dais, is to do this city a service by creating a coherent framework for decision-making. I mean, this issue has been, as I've said, debated before. Some would say the issue has been avoided, but I do think that this council is in the position of finally bringing some coherence and concordance to our zoning dilemma. It may not make everybody happy, but at least it will be consistent and have some basis in a thoughtful process. So I agree with Mr. Kalin. I think that no matter, you give people a year and 11 months, somebody will be knocking on the door. But be that as it may, I think, I certainly hope that tonight people will leave this room knowing that, okay, the process has been started. Public comment is being invited, but whether it's, December or August 2014, we will have a coherent process that will, one hopes, be appreciated by current and future residents of the city of Falls Church.
Thank you. Other council member comments? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. I promised to listen and not speech, and so I will hew to that. Very thoughtful and heartfelt comments by the citizens and by my colleagues. I really appreciate your expertise and everything that's been said. It sounds like I'm going to be in line with where I hear you all are going. Just from a scheduling perspective, looking here and seeing that the Planning Commission plans to hold its public hearing on this on Monday, July 1st. If the Planning Commission in its wisdom deems that week, which is a holiday week, is the right time to hold that public hearing, I guess I would just alert the citizenry, all of those here tonight and anybody listening on television. I think the Planning Commission especially would benefit from hearing even more than they've already heard on some of these topics that we've talked about here tonight. The aesthetics, the economics, the comp plan, the notion of an overlay district, which to me is like showing that the comp plan knows how to breathe and change and adapt to new conditions. That to me is the very important dialogue for the community to have, because, who knows what's going to happen even a year from now. I mean, a new council would come in and decide, gee, it's not working the way we thought and we're going to change it. But we do need to try to think way down the road, if we can, when we do these changes. And the best way to do that as intelligently as possible is to hear from people. But I do feel, I agree with Ms. Berry and others, that we need to wrestle with this, and we need to try to get it down on the mat and give clear guidance to staff and check this off the list and move on to other things that have, also tremendous economic and aesthetic importance to the city. So that's why at the beginning I said I'm going to vote to move forward, and I'm still there, and I'm willing to entertain if there's a revised motion on the date. Thanks.
All right, we actually don't have a motion, so if I can get a motion, and then we'll move forward. Mr. Pepe?
Yeah, and I want to make this clear what the motion is. The motion differs from what is written here in the packet in that lines 119 and 123 would change to 2014. That would be the only change. Because that's a year after, they made some good points about after there is an adoption of something. So effective August 1st, 2013, you leave that the same in 132, but these conditions are 2014. That make sense, Mr. Foster?
It does. I want to make sure we cover all the dates. Did you mention line 132 as well, Mr. Pepe?
Well, I wanted to ask a question about that, because is there an issue with, it seems to me the ordinance actually becomes effective on August 1st, 2013, but that it's implemented based on the changes in those other two lines.
Correct.
To make it clear, there is something specific on the books that's decided. Of course, subsequent councils can do what subsequent councils want, and I'm certainly not running for re-election, so I'm doing this because I think it's right, not because it has anything to do with what I want the next council to do. Yeah, exactly. So I think we're all coming at it from that position. So is that clear for the clerk about what I'll be moving?
119 and 123, you're going to change 2013 to 2014, is that correct?
Correct, and with that change, then I would move to adopt TO 1316 on first reading, schedule public hearing and second reading for July 22nd, 2013.
Ron, before we
Go ahead.
complete, I just want to make sure that we've got both dates need to be changed. Mr. Foster, if the intent of the council is basically to have this as an effective date, but we want to capture the lots that are in place now, does that do that
Yes.
by changing both to 14?
Yes. I mean, to go back to the lines that Mr. Pepe just mentioned. Right.
I just, my only question is, the first one, changing that to 14 makes sense. Does it, I just want to make sure again that the line 122 also should be changed.
Yes.
Both need to be changed.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
At line 132, that line, that stays.
That's the one that stays the same.
I'm sorry, so one does stay the same.
Yeah, 132.
132.
And 123 changed to 2014.
This changes.
And 132 stays the same.
Stays the same.
Correct. Because this is saying this ordinance would be effective this date, assuming it gets approved, but that these conditions, the grandfather conditions as they're being referred to.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you, Ron. All right.
Okay,
Everybody,
so,
you want to make the motion?
so I will
one more
make
time?
that again, with those two changes and those two lines. Move to adopt TO 1316 on first reading, schedule public hearing, and second reading for July 22nd, 2013, and advertise the same according to law.
Thank you. If I can get a second, please. Ms. Berry on the second. Any further discussion on this, council?
No.
Okay. Can I have the roll call vote, please?
Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalen?
Yes?
Mr. Pepe?
Yes?
Mr. Baruch, Mayor Baruch?
Yes.
Thank you, council. And the next item before you, council, TO 13-17, ordinance to authorize sale of the city's water system under agreement of sale conditioned upon passage of November 2013 referendum and approval of boundary adjustments.
The non-controversial stuff.
I know, look at that, look at that.
The water.
It's incredible. Yeah. $30 million water sale, $40 million.
Mr. Foster?
Okay, this is here on first reading. It's an ordinance to authorize sale of the city's water system required by Virginia Code. The second reading will be scheduled for June 24th, 2013. As council knows and has been discussed in public forums, in November of 2012, the city negotiated with Fairfax County and Fairfax Water the terms for the sale of the city's water system for $40 million in additional terms, including a boundary adjustment that would bring several parcels that are currently in Fairfax County into the city limits. That would include the George Mason High School and Mary Ellen Henderson Middle School campus, as well as city-owned properties on Gordon Road. The boundary adjustment is covered under a separate agreement between the City of Falls Church and Fairfax County. That separate boundary adjustment agreement is currently being reviewed by the Virginia Commission on Local Government. Now, on the water sales agreement that will be coming to council on June 24th, the negotiated terms include a 3-year guarantee of employment for all water system employees at comparable pay and benefits. Also includes lowering city water rates to the Fairfax water level within 2 years of closing on the transaction. And the, in addition, the net proceeds of sale are estimated to be about $10 million. And so, with all that, it is conditioned upon 2 very important things happening. Passage at a November referendum is the first, and secondly, that the boundary adjustment agreement I mentioned earlier is approved by the requisite authorities, including a 3-judge panel. With that, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Foster?
That was a comment, not a question.
Mr. Foster, I'll start it off. I've got a process question. So this is only to authorize the sale of the system. It's not an authorization for the actual sales agreement at this point, is that right?
That's correct. This is the first reading on the ordinance. The ordinance is what is required by Virginia code. This is not an authorization or approval of the sales agreement. That will be coming to City Council on June 24th.
All right. Other questions? Mr. Cameron?
You don't have to go into it. I just wonder, have we made any progress on the issue of the actuarial findings?
We await those numbers from the actuaries.
Okay. Other council members?
And when,
Mr. Johnson?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we deal with the sales agreement, that's where we will have a discussion that is a little more detailed in terms of line 30 fiscal impact, which now says a significant net fiscal positive. We would hopefully be able to quantify that a little bit more.
Yes.
Then, okay, just to make it clear to the public that that's the case.
All right. Other council members? Okay. If I can have him, well, why don't we go ahead and open this item up for public comment? Are there any members of the public that wish to address this item? Not seeing any. Ms. Bichette, did we have any public comments on this? I'm going to go ahead and close this item up for public comment. If I can get a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve TO 13-17 on first reading, schedule second reading and public hearing for June 24th, 2013, and advertise the same according to law.
Thank you. Is Mr. Kalin on the second? Any discussion? Okay. If I can have the roll call, please.
I just wanted to make sure I'm done.
On 213-17, on first reading, Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalin?
Yes.
Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Mr. Tartar is gone. Mayor Baruch?
Yes.
Thank you, council.
Did somebody forget to call Mr. Tartar?
I believe the assistant city manager called him and told him we were off the split lot issue. So
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, do we have all the roll call votes?
Well, we have all the ones
That are here?
Yeah.
Looks like we're at the end of, it's time for Mr. Tartar to go home, actually, because we're almost done.
I don't think my vote was cast.
Not Mayor Baruch?
Yes.
I did call your name.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We don't have any consent items. Other business, believe that we raised the truck or food truck issue. Mr. Shields, anything further on that?
I have to apologize to council. I have had discussions with staff, and but I don't have a definitive answer on it. I need to pick that back up, and I will get a report to council before your next work session.
Great, thank you. Anything else, any other council member comments or requests? Mr. Duncan?
Sorry if I steal your thunder. Stop me if I am. This weekend, a lot of big things happening. Ribbon cutting at Lincoln Park, hooray. I took pictures. Someday I'll get them out of my camera and give them to Danny like he asked. The mayor was there.
Phil, you're gonna not show me in spandex, right? You fixed that.
I have awesome pictures of the mayor in spandex. Awesome. He looks buff. And League of Women Voters had its, there's Mr. Tartar. League of Women Voters had its annual meeting Saturday morning. Chief of Police Mary Gavin was the speaker. Good program. Tenor Hill Blues Festival obviously was terrific. And more will be said later on, but since 3 of my esteemed colleagues have today announced that they are not seeking reelection, I just want to be the first to express my appreciation for their years of service and the significant accomplishments that they can take credit for in their time on council. Thank you.
Other council members? And I'll just echo Phil's comments on that, but more to come on roasting them later. And it will be a roast. All right. Anything further as far as council member comments? And we don't have any meetings. If I can get a motion to adjourn unless there's anything else.
Decide on a scheduled question about that July 1st work session?
No, because yeah, are people planning on not being here?
I'm going to be here. July 1.
I need to go see my parents at some point in Tennessee, and that might be
It's
when.
Monday.
Monday.
Are people around?
Yeah, I'm around, he's not.
Okay, so Ron's out.
I'm here.
Phil, if you can send us a note.
I would plan to be away if we were not going to meet. If we are going to meet, I will plan to be here.
Why don't we, there's nothing on, why, is there anything pressing on the agenda? I want to. So we may have a packed, so if people want to not meet on the 1st, but have a more packed session, I'm happy to do that. Does that make sense? That way, if people want to go away for a long weekend, they can do that. Okay, so why don't we do that? Why don't we keep the 1st off the calendar? Or the 1st clear? Okay? Phil, thanks for reminding us about that. All right, anything else? All right, if I can get a motion to adjourn, please.
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Thank you. That's Ms. Berry on the 1st. If I can get a second, please. Mr. Kalin on the 2nd. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, council.